When I first heard that my narcissistic ex had died, I didn't know how to feel. There wasn't a wave of relief or a flood of sadness, just silence. For years, they had filled my life with noise, chaos, and control. And suddenly, it was gone. The person who once consumed every thought of mine no longer existed. The absence felt heavy, not because I missed them, but because I couldn't comprehend that someone so dominating could vanish so completely. People around me expected closure. They said things like, "At least now you can move on." But closure doesn't come wrapped in tragedy. It comes in realization, and that took time. When I learned they were gone, I expected to feel free. Instead, I felt something stranger. Confusion. How could someone who caused so much pain still leave behind such a strong emotional shadow? It was as if their manipulation didn't die with them. It lingered in memory. In the days after their death, I kept remembering the good moments, even though I knew they were part of the illusion. The dinners, the laughter, the times they made me feel seen. Those memories resurfaced like ghosts. That's the cruel thing about narcissists. Even when you know the love was conditional, your heart still remembers the performance. It took me a while to understand that what I missed wasn't them. It was the version of love I thought I had. I found out more about their life after we separated. How many people they had alienated, how many bridges they burned. It shocked me to realize I wasn't special in my suffering. I was one of many who had been used, discarded, and forgotten. But knowing that didn't make it easier. It made me sadder. Because for all their arrogance and cruelty, their story ended the same way it began. Alone, misunderstood, and still blaming the world for their emptiness. I thought I would feel justice, like the universe had balanced something out. But there was no victory in their death. Only stillness. No apology, no acknowledgement, no redemption. Just the finality of silence. Narcissists live as if they'll never face consequence. And when they die, it feels like they got away with everything. But as I reflected deeper, I realized that death doesn't absolve or excuse. It only exposes the truth left behind. Their funeral was surreal. People spoke kindly, as they often do when someone dies. They called them charming, ambitious, misunderstood. I stood there, listening, wondering if anyone in that room truly knew who they were. Maybe they didn't. Narcissists are experts at curating perception, and even in death, that image remained intact. I didn't correct anyone. I just watched quietly, knowing that the person they praised was never real. It was a mask that died with them. After the funeral, I felt the strangest mix of emotions. Part of me wanted to grieve. Part of me wanted to forget. I wasn't mourning the person. They were gone long before death took them. I was mourning what I lost inside myself during those years. My trust, my peace, my innocence. Death doesn't erase the damage. It only stops the harm from continuing. The healing, though, that part is left for the living. I started dreaming about them again. Not as they were, but as fragments. Apologies they never gave. Moments of vulnerability they never allowed. It was like my mind was trying to rewrite the ending. But even in my dreams, they couldn't love me genuinely. Every tender gesture came with manipulation, every smile with control. That's when I finally understood. Death didn't change who they were. It just froze them in time, still unreachable, still hollow. The more I learned about their final years, the more it broke my heart. Beneath the facade, they'd become even lonelier, even more isolated. No friends, no family who trusted them, just a circle of people who tolerated their arrogance. And yet, they probably thought they were in control until the end. Narcissists rarely see their collapse coming. Their illusion of power blinds them to how empty their world becomes once everyone they exploit finally walks away. Eventually, I stopped asking why it had to end that way. I realized their death didn't close the story. It revealed it. They had spent a lifetime running from themselves, and that's what finally caught up to them. There was no justice, no punishment, only truth. And that truth was simple. No one escapes the emptiness they create. Even when life ends, the pain they've caused lingers. But so does the strength of those who survived them. In the weeks that followed, I noticed something strange. People who once believed their lies began reaching out to me. They wanted to share stories, moments of cruelty, betrayal, manipulation. Each account mirrored my own experience, just with different details. It was as if, in death, their mask had finally cracked. The truth I'd been screaming silently for years no longer sounded bitter. It sounded believable. And that realization brought an unexpected calm. Still, I struggled with guilt. It wasn't logical, but it was real. I asked myself if I should have tried harder to help them, if I had given up too soon. That as the part of healing they never talk about. The survivor, as guilt that lingers long after the abuse ends. I had to remind myself that compassion doesn't mean self-destruction. You can care about someone's pain without allowing them to keep inflicting it. Their choices were never my responsibility. There were moments when I wanted to feel anger again, just so I wouldn't feel pity. But anger requires energy, and they had already taken too much of mine. I learned that letting go isn't a single act, it's a practice. Every day, I had to choose peace over resentment, understanding over bitterness. Because even in death, narcissists can steal your energy if you let their memory dominate your mind. I refused to let them keep that control. What surprised me most was how quickly the world forgot them. Within weeks, their names stopped being mentioned. Their image stopped being shared. For someone who once demanded constant admiration, their disappearance was quiet, almost invisible. It struck me that narcissists live for attention but die into silence. They spend their lives trying to be unforgettable, yet they vanish faster than anyone. That irony was both tragic and poetic. I went through old photos one night, expecting to feel sadness. Instead, I felt distance. The faces in those pictures looked like strangers. I saw myself smiling beside someone who never truly existed. That realization didn't hurt. It freed me. The person I loved was a projection, a role they played to keep me attached. And when the actor is gone, all that remains is the empty stage where the illusion once stood. Sometimes I wondered if they ever thought of me before they died. Did they feel regret? Did they remember what they did? The truth is, probably not. Narcissists rarely reach that level of honesty, but imagining that they did, just once, gave me peace. Not because I needed their apology, but because I needed to believe that, in their final moments, they saw the truth they spent their life avoiding. That love isn't control, and control isn't love. I started realizing that death didn't make them powerful again. It made them human. The same person who once seemed larger than life was now just another fragile story, another flawed soul. The fear I once felt for them disappeared completely. Death stripped away their dominance, their manipulation, their grandeur. What remained was only a memory, no longer a threat, just a reflection of how far I had come from their shadow. One day, I visited the place where they were buried. I didn't go for closure or forgiveness. I went for understanding. Standing there, I felt no hate, no love, no fear, just stillness. The ground was quiet, the air calm. And in that silence, I realized something powerful. They no longer had any control over my emotions. For the first time in years, the connection between us was gone. Not broken, but dissolved. I walked away lighter. As more time passed, I noticed how their memory stopped triggering me. The pain lost its sharpness, replaced by perspective. I began to see the relationship not as a tragedy, but as a transformation. Loving a narcissist taught me the cost of self-abandonment and the power of reclaiming yourself. Their death didn't heal me. My decision to live differently did. That was the real ending, not their final breath, but my first one, as a free person. The most shocking reality wasn't their death. It was realizing how alive I felt after it. For years, I had walked through life half numb, surviving, not living. But their absence gave space for something new. The silence they left behind became room for peace, laughter, and love that didn't hurt. Death ended their control, but it also began my rebirth. I learned that sometimes closure isn't an apology. It's the moment the noise finally stops. I started noticing how death exposed everything they had tried to hide. The truth began to surface, not through gossip, but through patterns. Old friends confessed how they'd been manipulated. Family members shared how they'd been used. It was strange hearing others describe the same cruelty I once blamed myself for. I wasn't alone anymore. And in that collective truth, I found something healing. Validation without vengeance, honesty without hate. There was a time I believed karma would deliver justice, that the universe would somehow balance the scales. But standing at the end of their story, I realized justice isn't about punishment. It's about freedom. Theirs came in the form of silence. Mine came in the form of peace. I didn't need them to suffer. I just needed the suffering they caused me to stop. Death didn't give me revenge. It gave me the reminder that my healing is mine alone. Sometimes, people ask me if I ever miss them. I don't. But I do miss who I thought they were. That version existed only in my mind. A person made of hope, imagination, and denial. Letting go meant accepting that I loved a lie, and that truth was harder to face than their death. Because mourning an illusion means grieving the part of yourself that believed it. But once I accepted that, the pain began to transform into clarity. After they died, I stopped trying to make sense of their choices. Narcissists live in a world of endless justification. Every lie had a reason, every cruelty a story. For years, I tried to understand their behavior as if understanding could heal me. But death showed me that some people never evolve. Some stories end before growth ever begins, and trying to find reason in their chaos is just another way to stay tied to it. There were days when anger tried to return. I would remember moments of humiliation, the manipulation, the betrayals. My mind wanted to reopen old wounds, to feel that fire again. But every time I let it, I felt smaller. I realized anger was just another form of attachment. To be truly free, I had to stop fighting with a ghost. Their story had ended, but mine was still being written, and I refused to let their memory hold the pen. I learned that forgiveness isn't about them. It's about reclaiming peace. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting the damage or pretending it didn't matter. It means releasing the grip the past has on your heart. When I finally forgave them, not with words, but in spirit, it felt like unlocking a door I didn't know was still closed. Their name no longer triggered me. It became just that, a name, a lesson, a story I survived. Sometimes I think about how fragile their life truly was, for all the pride, the boasting, the illusion of control. They were as mortal as anyone. Their need for validation couldn't save them. Their charm couldn't outlive them. In the end, the person who once believed they were untouchable was reduced to the same silence that awaits us all. Death doesn't discriminate, and in that truth, I found a strange sense of balance. There's a misconception that when a narcissist dies, the pain ends. But really, it changes form. The wounds they caused still echo through the people they touched. I met others who carried the same scars, the same confusion, the same ache. We shared stories, and in doing so, we began to heal each other. I realized that healing doesn't happen alone. Sometimes closure comes through community, through understanding that none of us were crazy. We were conditioned. In quiet moments, I sometimes catch myself feeling gratitude, not for them, but for what surviving them taught me. Loving someone so broken taught me boundaries, discernment, and the value of peace. Their death forced me to confront everything I ignored while they were alive. It made me realize how sacred it is to choose calm over chaos. They were the lesson I never asked for, but the one that shaped who I became after them. As more time passed, I found myself letting their memory fade naturally. I stopped analyzing, stopped reminiscing. The story began to lose color, as if the universe was gently erasing their presence from my heart. That's how true healing happens, not through dramatic closure, but through quiet forgetting. It doesn't mean I deny the past. It means the past no longer defines me. They became a chapter, not the whole book, and I finally turned the page. As I continued healing, I realized how much of my identity had been shaped around surviving them. For so long, my story revolved around their chaos, what they said, what they did, how they made me feel. But once they were gone, I had to rediscover who I was without the constant storm. It was uncomfortable at first. Freedom can feel unfamiliar when you've lived inside emotional captivity. But slowly, peace became my new normal. People often talk about closure like it's a single moment, a final conversation, or a letter you never send. But I learned that closure isn't something you find. It's something you create. I built mine out of truth and boundaries. I stopped waiting for explanations that would never come. I realized I didn't need their apology to validate my pain. Their death wasn't my closure. My self-respect was. That was the difference between surviving and truly healing. I started looking back at our history not with heartbreak, but with curiosity. I saw the patterns clearly: the charm, the control, the blame, the withdrawal. It was like studying an old map of a place I'd escaped from. I could see every turn that led me astray, and every moment I ignored my intuition. But instead of hating myself for it, I felt compassion. Because the person I was back then didn't know better. The person I am now does. Sometimes, I think about how strange it is that death made me see life differently. Their end reminded me that time is fragile, that energy is precious. I promised myself never to waste either on someone who feeds on pain. I stopped chasing closure from broken people and started giving it to myself. Death, in its harshness, became my greatest teacher. It showed me that peace isn't something you wait for. It is something you build one decision at a time. I learned that grief can exist even without love. I didn't grieve them as a partner. I grieved the version of me who once believed their lies. I cried for the innocence that died in that relationship, the person who wanted so badly to fix someone who never wanted to be healed. That grief was sacred. It wasn't weakness. It was release. Because every tear I shed for that past version of me watered the ground where my new self would grow. There were moments when I wondered if talking about them was wrong, as if acknowledging their darkness was disrespectful to the dead. But truth isn't cruelty, it's clarity. Speaking the truth doesn't dishonor the dead. It honors the living who are still healing. I wasn't telling their story to condemn them. I was telling mine to free myself. Because silence may protect their memory, but it also protects the wounds they left behind. I began to understand that some souls never find peace, even in death. Narcissists spend their lives running from accountability, and that fear doesn't just vanish when life ends. The chaos they carried continues in the memories of those they hurt. But I refused to let that energy live through me. I decided to be the end of it, to stop the cycle, to heal the part of me that once needed their validation. That was the real liberation. As the years passed, I felt a shift I couldn't explain. Their memory stopped feeling heavy. It no longer carried power, only perspective. I could speak their name without emotion, remember their face without tension. The past turned into a story I could observe rather than relive. That's when I knew I was free. Healing didn't erase them, it transformed them into something harmless, like a shadow that fades when the light grows stronger. The shocking reality I found wasn't that they had died. It was that I had finally started living. For the first time in years, I woke up without anxiety. I laughed without guilt. I trusted again, not because I forgot the pain, but because I learned from it. Their absence created space for peace to take root. I didn't realize how small my world had become until they were no longer in it. Death closed their story, but it opened mine. Looking back now, I see their death not as an ending, but as a mirror. It reflected everything I had to release. The pain, the guilt, the illusion. It taught me that survival is only the beginning, that healing means reclaiming joy, not just escaping suffering. I no longer wonder what they felt in their final moments. I only hope they found the peace they never gave anyone else. Because I did. And that's the closure I never thought I'd find. In the quiet moments now, I sometimes think about how different things could have been if they'd chosen healing instead of control. But then I remind myself, it was never my job to save them. Some people don't want peace, they want power. And you can't rescue someone who mistakes love for weakness. Their death taught me that lesson in the harshest but most honest way possible. We can change people who done to believe they rebroken. I used to wonder why they hurt me when all I wanted was to love them. But now, I see it differently. I didn't lose because they couldn't to love me. I won because I could love despite their emptiness. My compassion wasn't weakness. It was proof that I still had a soul. Narcissists spend their lives running from the very thing that makes us human, vulnerability. And maybe that's why their story ended the way it did, cold, unfinished, and lonely. Their death became a strange kind of teacher. It showed me that endings don't always come with fireworks or redemption. They come quietly, in moments of truth. I learned that closure isn't about the other person at all. It's about finding meaning in the mess, peace in the silence, and purpose in the pain. Their absence made me realize how deeply alive I was, how much strength it takes to rebuild after someone has tried to erase you. Sometimes I think about how they'd react if they saw me now. Calm, content, no longer controlled by fear. They used to feed on my emotions, but now my peace would starve them. That thought doesn't come from revenge, but from power reclaimed. It's a quiet kind of victory, the kind that doesn't need to be announced. Healing doesn't roar, it whispers, and mine simply says, "You no longer live here." That truth is louder than any apology. People often say time heals all wounds, but I don't believe that anymore. Time alone doesn't heal. It's what you do with the time that matters. I spent mine learning to unlearn, to forgive, to rebuild. Healing was work, not waiting. It was facing my pain, not avoiding it. And through that work, I discovered that the real miracle wasn't surviving them. It was transforming the parts of me they tried to destroy into sources of strength. I used to think their death meant the end of our connection, but now I see it differently. The connection didn't die. It transformed. The fear became understanding. The pain became wisdom. I don't carry them as a wound anymore. I carry them as a reminder. Not of who they were, but of who I'll never be again. They showed me what love isn't, and that knowledge has become one of the greatest protections I could ever have. Every once in a while I pass by a place we once went together. I no longer feel the ache I used to. Instead, I feel gratitude for surviving, for growing, for finally seeing that I deserved more. The ghosts of our past still whisper sometimes, but their voices are faint now, fading with every breath I take in freedom. The past doesn't haunt me anymore. It humbles me. It reminds me of how far peace had to travel to find me. There is something humbling about realizing that even the most powerful person in your life is just human in the end. Mortality strips away all illusions, titles, masks, charm. When they died, the myth of their superiority died with them. For the first time, I saw them not as a monster, but as a fragile, frightened person who never learned to love themselves. That vision didn't make me pity them. It helped me forgive both of us for being human. As I tell this story now, I do it not for sympathy, but for understanding. I want others to know that closure doesn't always come wrapped in justice. Sometimes it comes when you realize you don't need it anymore. My narcissistic ex didn't change in life, and death didn't make them better. But I changed. I grew. I lived. And that's the real ending. The story was never about their destruction. It was always about my rebirth. The shocking reality I found after my narcissistic ex died wasn't about them. It was about me. I discovered that healing doesn't depend on anyone's apology, and peace doesn't require permission. I learned that even after years of manipulation, love can still live in me, just not for them, but for myself. They may have taken chapters of my past, but I own the rest of the book. Their ending was final. Mine, thankfully, was just beginning.